Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Books with Meena. I'm Meena and today I'm going to be doing my March wrap up. So in the month of March, I read quite a lot of books. I think I read a total of 9 books. I DNF'd one book and I am in the middle of another book. And overall it was a pretty great reading month even in terms of my book ratings. Most of the books that I read I really liked and enjoyed. So let's just jump right into my wrap up. So the first book that I read in the month of March was Moxie by Jennifer Mchugh, and this one is a young adult contemporary about these group of teenage girls in high school, and they start this feminist movement together called Moxie to kind of, in retaliation for the sexist environment that is there in their school. And our main character, she is the one who actually starts this. She starts distributing these zines or newsletters anonymously, and nobody knows who is doing it, and slowly this movement starts spreading to like a lot of the girls in the school. I would give this book like a 3.5 to 4 stars. It was quite good. It was more simple, straightforward. I would recommend this to younger readers, and I do think that if you are somebody who is new to feminist themes and topics, then this is the book that you should probably pick up because it is a little bit more basic and easier to read. Even in terms of its writing style, I would say that this book is more simple, and even the characters are very relatable. The story is told in a pretty linear format, so overall this book was good. I enjoyed it, and it does have some good things to say. It can be a little bit basic at times and might read a little bit younger to people who have already read a lot of young adult books, but I would still recommend it and I still enjoyed it, so a 3.5 to 4 stars. I do have a review up for Moxie, both the book and the movie. The movie came out earlier in March and it has Amy Poehler in it, so I reviewed both of those. So if you would want to check that out, I will leave the link in the description below. The next book that I read is Stay Gold by Dobly Mcsmith. This one is about Pony, who is a trans boy, and he, in his previous high school, he came out as being trans, but then he felt tokenized and there were some people who were bullying him. So now in his new high school, he has decided to keep his trans identity a secret so that he doesn't feel othered. He just wants to fit in and have a normal life. Our other main character is Georgia, who in this high school, she is a cheerleader, she's very popular, and she just wants to pass under the radar for her last year of high school. But Pony and Georgia kind of have this like they start becoming friends, and eventually it leads to a romance. So this book I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it, and I appreciated all that it said about with Pony's character being trans and all the things that he had to go through. I would say this book is a pretty good balance of being like a cute rom-com-ish contemporary and also like tackling some more hard-hitting difficult topics. Pony's chapters were definitely more heavy and emotional. You can see him, I wouldn't say he's struggling with his identity, but sometimes he does struggle with the people around him who might not be the most supportive, whereas Georgia's chapters were more lighthearted. She is a very goofy character who makes a lot of jokes and is almost like the class clown, and I really appreciated that we got to see a cheerleader character who had this like sense of humor, which is like very over the top and goofy. I thought that was very refreshing. The banter between both of these characters was just top notch cuteness. I was totally rooting for both of them to get together by the end of the book. The ending of the book was kind of cheesy, but at the end of the day, I was happy that the two main characters got their happy ending because they totally deserved it. The only reason I took off a 0.5 star from the 5-star rating is because there were some smaller things that bothered me a little bit. So the first one would be Pony's best friend Max, who is also a trans boy, and he keeps forcing Pony to come out in his new high school as trans, and that did not sit well with me. Pony does stand up for himself and say that I am going to come out whenever I am comfortable. And the other thing that bothered me is that this is kind of mentioned in passing a couple of times in the book. Pony tells that he went to boy boot camp, and there they taught these like young people on how to like attract girls or just people in general, and they would like give advice such as like be an asshole or like act very mysterious and aloof. And I'm like, who is teaching young people pick up artistry? Like, is this still happening in 2020? And again, I'm not saying that this book is advocating for like forcefully coming out or pickup artistry, but these things were still there, and I just, they bothered me a little bit, so I deducted a 0.5 star. Other than that, I really liked this book. I would totally recommend it. There are trigger warnings for transphobia, gender dysphoria, a lot of things, so look that up in Goodreads. The next book that I read is The Female of the Species by Mindy Mcginnis. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book so much. This one, we are following 3 characters living in this small town. We have Alex, whose elder sister was raped and murdered a couple of years ago, and Alex is now like the mysterious loner kid, the weirdo in her high school. And the other character that we're following is Jack. He is the golden star boy athlete and the most like popular guy in the school. Then we have PK, who is the preacher's kid, and she kind of has to like live up to this model behavior because she is the preacher's kid, but then she does have like this hidden rebellious streak. She and Alex become friends at the beginning of the book because they are volunteering at the same animal shelter. So this is where the story starts, and I loved this book. But what is funny is that the first 200 pages when I was reading it, I was so confused, and not because the writing style is dense or that there are a lot of plot twists and turns in the book, but I just, I kept reading the first 200 pages and I kept thinking, what is this book trying to be? What is it trying to say? And sometimes the characters would like do things or say things or think things in their head, and I would just not agree with it, and which is why this book confused me so much, and I did not know whether to like it or dislike it. But by the end of the book, this book is not very long. It is like 340 pages. So by the end, I totally loved this book. It made me so emotional. The ending was quite powerful, and this book does, like I have mentioned this in the previous video, it does have a very unflinching look at the harsh realities of life. It takes a look at rape culture and sexual assault, and the repercussions of it, the consequences, the people that are dealing with these things happening in their lives, and I loved that about the book. This is definitely a contemporary, but it does read a lot like a mystery thriller. The writing style is a little bit more like cutting, and I would say a little bit on the darker side, especially Alex's chapters. You can see how she has been hardened by life. Contrary to that, we have PK, who is, I think, the most relatable character out of all the 3. Something that stood out to me about this book once I finished reading it and I kept thinking about it, is that these characters are not supposed to be likable or relatable. They are very much their own people, and you're getting to see the world through their perspective, through their eyes, throughout this book, and they are very flawed and messed up people. And like I said, they do things, they say things, they think things that you might not agree with, but at the end of the day, they are very fleshed out and real characters. And I loved this book. I could keep talking on and on about it because I loved it so much. But yes, 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first person who is singing the praises of The Female of the Species. The next book that I read is How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams, and this one is an adult rom-com romance contemporary. This one is about Naya Turner, who is a math professor, and for the past 3 to 4 years, after she got out of this abusive relationship with her ex-boyfriend, she has been kind of, trying to make herself very invisible. She doesn't go out and have fun. Her life is very monotonous. She basically just goes to her job and comes back home and doesn't do a lot more. At the beginning of the book, her best friends basically tell her to go out there and have fun. They make a list for her to get a life, and so she decides to go to a bar, and there she randomly meets this guy, and they start talking and they have some cute banter, and Naya decides that she is going to have a one night stand, no strings attached. But since this is a rom-com, obviously things don't last for just one night. And what are the chances that after 3 to 4 years of being a recluse, you go to a bar and you meet some random guy, turns out he's the perfect guy? The chances are like probably more towards 0 in real life, but in romance novels the odds are tipped towards the other end. But yes, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really cute and romantic and swoony. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked Naya. I was totally rooting for her to find happiness and just be happy by the end of the book. You slowly get to see her learning to trust people again throughout the book, especially men, and how she is opening herself up to being in a new relationship. Same with the love interest Jake. He also has his own reservations for not getting into this like new relationship, but both of them are trying their best to be there for each other, and overall their romance was very cute. Their banter was very witty and smart, and not in the way like, oh, look at us, how smart we are, we know so much. It was more like, they would both crack like lame dad jokes, and when the joke wouldn't it would fall flat, and then they would both like laugh over how terrible their sense of humor is. And I found that to be very endearing and cute. I have said the word cute a lot of times, but this book is definitely quite cute. There are some steamy scenes, and I would say that they were more there towards the beginning of the book, which makes sense because it does start out with the main character wanting to have a one night stand, and there are trigger warnings in this book for I would say that it doesn't happen on page, but we do get to see Naya, recounting the events that happened with her ex-boyfriend, who was not only emotionally but also physically abusive. And so, trigger warnings for those things. So, yes, overall, enjoyed this book, really liked it. We do have, this is definitely kind of more of a friends to lovers romance situation where we don't really have two characters with like totally opposing personalities, so their personalities don't tend to stand out that much. They are quite similar and more like normal people, but I think that this book does is very enjoyable because of the banter and the cuteness that these two characters and the romance brings to the table. The next book that I read is American Betiya by Anuradha D. Rajakar, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This one is quite a new recent release. It released in March 9th, if I'm not wrong, and this is a young adult contemporary about Rani Kelkar, who is an Indian American teenager, and she has never lied to her parents. She doesn't really, try to rebel against them. They're quite strict. So the story starts off with Rani meeting a white guy called Oliver, and he is, he comes from the wrong side of the tracks. He is an artist, he has tattoos, he's completely the kind of guy that Rani's parents would disapprove of her dating. And so the whole story is kind of Rani sneaking off to, meet Oliver and secretly dating him behind her parents' backs. This one was quite a different young adult contemporary that I have read in quite some time. I think it centers around this like toxic relationship between Rani and Oliver. From the very first moment that you meet them, you kind of understand that it's not going to end well. It's only going to go downhill from here, because there are some like smaller red flags that appear at the beginning of the book, and they keep getting bigger and bigger by the end of the book. This book does talk about racism and microaggressions. It also talks about exoticism and fetishizing people of color, and all of this conversation happens around Rani and Oliver's toxic relationship. And I think that was very interesting to read, a young adult contemporary where the plot is revolving around this thing. My favorite part of the book was when Rani was interacting with her family members, whether it be her parents, her grandparents, and she also goes to India, Pune, for a amount of time in the book later on, and there you get to see her interacting with her cousins, aunts and uncles who live in India, and I thought all of those interactions felt very authentic, and they were definitely my favorite part of the book. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I do have some criticisms for it. So the first one would probably be that Rani did not feel very fleshed out. She did not have much of a personality. I think she embodied the kind of ideal Asian American kid trying to live up to their parents' expectations, but also trying to explore the world for themselves. She was very much the embodiment of that type of a person or character, and I just wish there was more to her than that. We also start the story with getting to know that Rani does photography, and that kind of never really came into the plot anymore. There were some parts where you do get to see her, clicking photos, I guess, but I just wish that it had been a more integral part of the story, but it really wasn't. It almost just felt like we forgot for a huge portion of the book that Rani is into photography, and then by the end of the book, we again start remembering that she has this hobby or passion of hers. So in some ways, this did read like a debut novel, but I still enjoyed and liked it for most of it. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado, and this one is also a young adult contemporary that came out quite recently, I think in the month of February. And also this cover is really beautiful. Just wanted to put it out there. This one is about a fat teenager who is also Puerto Rican, I think, and she Her name is Charlie, obviously, and she does have some body image issues. Some days she feels very much confident inside her body, but then there are other days where she doesn't feel like she is enough because of how she looks. And this book is, I would just say, like a coming of age story. As you get to know Charlie a little bit more, you get to see her life with her friends at school, with her, family, her mom, and she is biracial, so she is half Puerto Rican and half white. And you kind of also get to see her, getting to know her Puerto Rican side a little bit better. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I think this was very cute, fun. I would describe this to be like a YA rom-com, coming of age story. Yeah, and it does talk a lot about body image issues and fat phobia. I don't think that the book itself is like being fat phobic, but you do encounter a lot of characters in Charlie's life who are fat phobic. And the number one example of this would be Charlie's mom, who is constantly telling Charlie to lose weight and do things to like look better so that she can have an easier life. And you kind of get to see this like very up and down tumultuous relationship between the mother and the daughter, and how they both they are sometimes very supportive and the best of friends, but other times they butt heads and do not agree with each other at all. And Charlie even says at some point in the book that her relationship with her mom will never be properly mended, and she will have to be okay with that. And I thought that felt very real and raw. Other than that, I think that there was some like cute romances, cute friendships in this book, but they never really stood out to me as being something completely like mind blowing or completely different. They were cute, I enjoyed them, and I don't really have much more to say about that. So yes, 4 out of 5 stars. Enjoyable book, with like fat representation, having like a character who is struggling with this at the forefront of the book, but is also not reduced to only being that. Charlie does have other hobbies and interests. She likes writing and reading, so all of that I thought was just really good and well written. So yes, enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley or Bowley, and I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This one is about Denise, who is a half Native American and half white teenager. She is 18 and she has just passed out from high school, and she doesn't really feel like she fits in with either of the communities, whether it be her mom's white side of the family or her dad's Native American side of the family. At the beginning of the book, Denise, she witnesses a murder happening, and that kind of pulls her into this FBI secret undercover investigation going on about the drug distribution in her area. And because of somebody who is distributing these drugs and selling them, these murders are taking place. Dennis decides to basically be like this undercover spy for these police officers and help them in this investigation. So I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I already have a review up for this book on my channel, so if you want more in-depth thoughts on it, I would recommend you check out that video. But overall, I thought that this book was almost perfect for a YA novel. It was quite ambitious. It is tackling a lot of topics from racism, microaggression, drug abuse. There's like a mystery thriller plot, and there is like so much going on with familial dynamics. You get to see a more inside look on these like Native American communities, the hierarchies within them, the way that people treat each other. And Dennis is a part of the Ojibwe community, and you get to see a lot of their culture, their language, their traditions, and their history in this book, which I thought was just a very nice thing to read. So this one was a good balance of like day-to-day life of like Dennis and her navigating her world, but also like this mystery thriller element where she is trying to figure out where are these drugs coming from and who is the one who is peddling them. That kept me, that made me keep turning the pages and wanting to know more about the book. This one is quite long for, I think it's almost like 500 pages, which is quite long for a YA novel, but I think that the pacing was done pretty well and it handled and balanced all the topics well together. The only reason I took off a 0.5 star is for the romance. I think that the age gap between the two characters was just unnecessary. I just wish that the romance hadn't existed, because the love interest, the guy, he is like 22, he's a police officer, and I think he has been a police officer for at least a couple of years. So I just wish that Dennis had either been a little bit older, or either that the romance hadn't existed at all. And I didn't see the point of it existing in the book, because the love interest, we don't really get to know anything about him because he is doing his job undercover, so he's not supposed to give any amount of information about himself. So even by the end of the book, we don't really get to see his backstory, we don't really get to know more about his personal life, and so I just did not see the point of having this romance in the book. So the next book that I read was The Knockout by Sa Patel, and this one is also a young adult contemporary about this Indian American teenager called Kareena Thakkar, who is a Muay Thai fighter. And this one, Muay Thai is actually a form of martial art. So she gets selected for this US National Championship, and she really wants to go because she's really passionate about the sport. But what happens is that her financial condition at home is not the best. Her father is chronically ill, her mom is doing two jobs. So Kareena has to find out a way to kind of, gather money and revenue for her to be able to go for this national championship. And that is one huge part of the story, the Muay Thai national championship. But apart from that, we also get to see Kareena kind of grapple with her Indianness and how she doesn't feel very Indian, or other people make her feel excluded from the Indian community in this, like, I guess you can say, predominantly white Texas town, because she is a girl and she plays this like very aggressive sport. She has muscles and that kind of stuff. She doesn't really take part in like religious traditional activities, so people make her feel like she does not belong in the community. And these are like the two main things of this book. And going into it, I was really excited to read it, and I wanted to like this book a lot. The first 10% I really liked reading. I thought that the writing style was very energetic and enthusiastic. Seeing Kareena's passion and drive and determination, all of that for this martial art was really aspirational, and I liked that a lot about her. But the first 10% of the book was quite good, but from there it all went downhill. I ended up giving this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I did not like it that much. I was disappointed in this book. And I think the main reason was because the writing style, while it was very energetic and enthusiastic, I still feel like it felt a little immature and on the younger side. Some of the drama and the conflict felt quite juvenile. Kareena as a character became unlikable. The drama part of the book, some of the conflict that arises with her fellow like Indian community people who are also like teenagers and they go to her same high school, felt juvenile and a little blown out of proportion. There was this like mean girl character who just exists to be the mean girl, and you don't really get to see any other side of her. And I get it, some people are mean and they don't deserve any redemption or anything, but I just found it to be quite a one note. And it just, everything was just very flat in this book. All the discussions that took place about Kareena's Indianness and how people see her as not being Indian or good enough because of the sport she plays, because she has muscles or behaves a certain way. I thought that all the conversations and discussions that were had in this book were very surface level and flat, juxtaposed with like the more immature and younger tone of the book. There were some scenes, especially the romantic ones, which felt more mature. I wouldn't call them graphic or explicit, but they definitely felt a little bit on the steamier side and, like I said, more mature. And I just felt like I don't know who this book is, meant for. Is this for like younger YA readers, or is this for some older YA readers? Because Kareena is 17, and so she is like the perfect young adult in the perfect young adult age range. So I don't know, just something about this book, everything just felt very straightforward and shoved down your throat. Even like the number of times that Kareena speaks about her like own struggles and how she is good enough because she is good enough, and I agree with that. But like she would just keep repeating the sentence, a lot of times throughout the book without really like reflecting on like anything. Or I just wish that these conversations were more fleshed out. But overall, I would say this is still a wholesome story overall, and because even though Kareena does have some obstacles that come in her way for competing for Muay Thai, or there are some people who are rude to her and don't like see her as being an equal. Overall, the story still felt wholesome because Kareena has a lot of supportive people around her, which include her parents, her friends, and there is even one love interest in this book. Yeah, just there are some positives in this book. I didn't dislike it completely, but I do think that this one just felt I did not end up liking it so much. Also, distinctly, when I was reading the book, there would be some sentences or some things that the characters would say or think in their heads that made me go like, really, this is how teenagers talk. It distinctly felt like there was an adult writing a book about teenagers and failing at really getting the voice of the teenager right. So that also made the reading experience quite like jarring at times. So yeah, 2.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I finished reading in the month of March, is Parachutes by Kelly Yang, and this one is a young adult contemporary again. And Parachutes, which is the name of this book, are basically people or young teenagers who come from rich families in China, and they are transported to America to get like an American education. And one of our main characters, Claire, is a parachute. So she is, she has come to America and she is living with our second main character, whose name is Danny. So Danny is a American Filipina. She has been born and brought up in America, and she comes from a really poor household. Her mom is a maid, and Danny also works part time as a maid. So you kind of they're basically poor, and she's a scholarship student in this like fancy private school. Claire also goes to the same fancy private school, but she obviously comes from a more privileged and rich family. So this book talks a lot about race and classism. You kind of get to see how Claire and Danny, both of them have like their ethnicities are Asian, but you also get to see the differences because Danny has had a more American upbringing and Claire has had a more I guess Chinese upbringing or like Asian upbringing. I don't know what to call it. And whereas Danny is poor, Claire is rich. She's like a little bit of a spoiled, and she has been spoiled. She has been very privileged in her life, whereas Danny has had to work hard for everything that she has. And you get to see both of these girls clash in that kind of way. They have very different personalities, and they do, and they start off the book not liking each other a lot. Also, a huge plot point in this book is sexual assault. So we have one case where we have an adult or a teacher who is actually behaving in a predatory way to a student, and the other case we have a high school student who is doing the sexual assault on one of our main characters. So this book does talk about these things too, and reading the book made me so angry, but like in all the best ways possible. This book evoked a lot of emotion from me, because we have two characters, Danny and Claire, and you get to see how they're trying to raise their voices and speak for themselves, stand up for themselves, but they're constantly being silenced, because they're girls or they're poor and they don't come from like the richest, most powerful families. How there are like systemic issues in place which don't allow people to seek justice for themselves. We have people in power misusing their power, and it all just made me so angry. But this is the reality that we live in, and if you read this book, I would definitely recommend you read the author's note at the back of the book. That also evoked a lot of emotion about that also evoked a lot of emotion from me and made me so angry. Apart from that, I think that this was a really well written novel. Danny and Claire's chapters are both written in first person point of view, and you kind of you get to see the distinct personalities and the distinct different outlooks on life. And even though they start off the book disliking each other, you see how they in the end start connecting with each other and are always there for each other. As for the racism and classism aspect, you get to see how there is kind of like this divide in their high school itself, with the white kids, and then even in the white kids you have like the scholarship kids and then the rich kids, and then you have the Asian Americans like Danny, you have parachutes like parachutes like Claire, and they all have like stereotypes and assumptions about each other. They have like their own groups, and they're all like separated a little bit from each other. All of these things I think the book captured very well. There was a lot of showing and not telling, which I appreciated. So overall, I loved this book. I think that everyone should read it. It was quite thought-provoking and just well written, and I totally recommend this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. As for the one book that I DNF'd, that was The Empress by Sj Kinkade. This one is the sequel to The Diabolic. I was enjoying it overall, but I just got bored with it at some point. I read 60%. I did appreciate that we were getting to see the world expand, and we were getting to see more of the history and the origins of this like futuristic outer space sci-fi world. But I don't know, the pacing of the book was just, things kept happening one after the other, and I wished that the pace would slow down at some points, so that when the book or the pacing, the plot would speed up, I would feel more excited to read it. So I just DNF'd it. which is a shame because I really enjoyed the first book, but I don't want to continue with the series that I'm not enjoying, so I DNF'd the Empress. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is the one that I'm in the middle of, and that is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. I have read 70% of this book, and this one is about this teenager called Nora. She has had a history with her mom where she used to partner up with her mom and con people into giving her money. And now she is like 17, 18. She has been taken hostage in a bank robbery with her girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend, and they're all trying to get out of this sticky situation. So I thought this book would be more of like fun, adventurous romp, that kind of a situation with like quirky, funny characters and quirky, funny dialogue. But that is not the case. I think that the description of the book and even the cover of the book kind of throws you off a little bit to think that it can be a little bit more cute and on the lighthearted side. But this book is quite dark. Actually, there are a lot of trigger warnings in this book for a bunch of stuff, and I will obviously talk about this more in depth when I finish the book and do a review for it or talk about it in my wrap up. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to comment down below what you read in the month of March, and be sure to comment, like, share, subscribe if you wish to do so. And that is it. Goodbye.